Hello everyone, my name is Cody Burke, and the reason I wanted to make this tutorial is because I was recently showing a Maya artist who was specializing in modeling how to use LightWave's modeler. He had a lot of basic but very informing questions that I thought would be helpful to a lot of people transitioning from an app such as Maya into LightWave, so let's take a look at some of them. First off, when you buy LightWave, you get two dedicated workspaces. You get Modeler, which is the interface that you're seeing now, and you also get Layout, which is for animation and rendering. Modeler is obviously dedicated for modeling, but you can also texture in it and rig inside it. So the first thing you'd want to know how to do in Modeler is how to navigate, which is very important for any software package that you're transitioning to. If you look in the top right-hand corner of each viewport, you can see we have these three controls here, and we'll talk about this fourth one in a second. But if you left-click on this four-way cross one here, that is your dolly control. The middle one is your orbit control, and the magnifying glass is the zoom control. There's also hotkeys for those navigation controls, and those are Alt left click for the orbit control, Alt control click for zooming, and Alt shift for dollying. Another cool tip is by hitting the G key wherever your cursor is at, and then hitting the period or comma keys to zoom in and out of that area. This fourth button, which looks like a page flipping over, will maximize any viewport that you selected in. The next thing you'd want to know how to do is how to customize Modeler's tabs. So all the tabs up here have a very specific set of tools in each of them. So if you would like to create something, you would go to the Create tab. You have basic primitives, your text, points, polygons, or curves, and then you can modify, for example, that box by moving it or rotating it, and you can add geometry to that box under the Multiply tab. So the reason that Modeler is very intuitive is because of this, because everything is spelled out for you. There's no odd icons that you don't know what's going on, so there's really nothing to be scared about. But let's say that you have a set of tools that you use on a daily basis. Well, what I would recommend is then starting your own tab up here and just filling it with all the tools that you use, because it'll speed up your workflow. So to do that, we can go to the Edit menu and choose Edit Keyboard Shortcuts. So for example, if you're coming from Maya and you have the QWERTY keys, you might want to change the hotkey of the Move tool in Modeler to, say, Q. So what we could do is go to Search, and I already have Move tool typed in there. I hit OK, and you can see that it finds the Move tool under the Command menu. And the reason it's grayed out is because it's already assigned to a hotkey. So we can scroll down to the letter T, because I know that that's the hotkey for Move inside of LightWave. I'm going to select that and choose Unassign. And then I can find Q, which is our change surface, and we can unassign that, and then choose Assign to assign it to the Move tool. And then once we're done, we can just hit Done. So now, what if we want to add our own tab up there? We could go to Edit and choose Edit Menu Layout. And for example, we have a lot of different menus here. You can see we have all the tabs. So we could just select Main Menu, and this will be before the Create tab, and we can choose New Group. You can see it adds our tab up there. So let's go to, over here on the command list, let's go to, say, Construct. And let's say I always use the Weld Points tool. I could select Weld Points, then select my new group, and choose Add. And you can see that over on the left-hand side, we now have Weld. So that's very useful. And let's just click Done. Okay, the next thing. There's no camera view inside of Modeler. And that's very important to understand. You can change the perspective of your camera inside of Layout once you're ready to get to that point. But in Modeler, when you're working on your model, think of it as your perspective, and you're looking at it from your viewpoint. So then once you're done, you take it into Layout, and that's where you add all your cameras. So there is no actual camera view inside of Modeler. Now let's talk about adding background images to use as references when you're modeling something. Now those are called image planes inside of Maya, but in Modeler, what you do is basically project the image just directly onto the background of each viewport, and it's very easy to set up. So let's hit the D key to open up the display options panel. And under the backdrop tab, we have top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right for each of our viewports. So we could go to the bottom left and choose image, load image, and I'm going to choose the front because we are in the back viewport. You can see it pops in right there. Now I'm going to go to the bottom right and choose the side. And what's cool is that you can actually adjust each of these images dynamically inside of Modeler. So for example, I just want to put that one back to 1. Come to the bottom left viewport here. So now I can just shift this over a little bit and line it up. All right, there we go. So another important thing to remember is that when you save out your model, these background images will not get saved with it. So what you want to do is come up to presets and choose Save All Backdrops, and that will save all of your viewports. If you choose Save Current Backdrop, it will only do the backdrop that you have currently selected. So once you come out of Modeler, you can then jump right back into it, load up your model, and then just make sure to come into the display options panel. Again, the hotkey is the D key, and just load in your backdrop. The next thing that this artist wanted to know is the selection process inside of Modeler. Because coming from a Maya background, he has object mode or component mode. For selection processes, Modeler doesn't really have modes. We have different selections that you can choose from those, such as points and edges and polygons down here in the bottom left-hand corner. And you can hit the space bar to navigate through those very easily. So points would be equivalent to vertices inside of Maya, and polygons would be equivalent to faces inside of Maya. So how do you move points and polygons inside of Modeler? Well, the first thing would be to come up to the Create tab and actually get some geometry in here. So we could choose box, for example, and while I'm drawing this out, I like to hold the Control key down because that constrains the box to all axes. And then I can come into the back view and just pull this up. Now, without dropping the tool, I can hit the N key, which will open up the numeric options panel, and there you can see all the settings for our box. So if I wanted this to be a perfect square, I could choose 1 meter for the width, 1 meter for the height, and 1 meter for the depth. I could also add some segments, such as that, or I could use the arrow keys to add segments or remove segments. I could also adjust the radius of this box and even add some segments in there to smooth it out. But for this purpose, I'm just going to set that back to 0. And I'm going to X out of the numeric panel, and to drop the tool, I'm going to hit spacebar or the Enter key. And I can hit F2, which will center our object right on the origin. So now we want to select these faces. Well, I have to be in Polygons mode to select them, and I can just do that by left-clicking. I could also hit the spacebar, go over to the points, and left-click on any point. Or I could right-click and lasso select, which will now deselect those, and if I do it again, it'll select it. To deselect something, just click on a blank area of the screen, such as this taskbar here, or down here in the bottom left-hand corner, and then it will drop your selection. So I can come back to Polygons mode, and you can see that's still selected. I can just left-click in the bottom left-hand corner to get rid of it. So let's move this top polygon here. All we have to do is select it, and we want to modify it, so we can come to the Modify tab and choose Move. And this is in perspective, the perspective view that I'm moving it. I could undo that by hitting Control Z, or I could come to any of the viewports, the orthographic views, and I could hold the Control key down to constrain it to that axis and move it that way. We also have a new tool coming out in LightWave 11.5, which is under the Modify tab, Transform, Pick Transform. So I could select that, and you see it brings up this cool gizmo where I could right-click on any of the faces or polygons inside of Modeler, and it'll center that gizmo to the normal. So this white box here will allow me to scale it. I could also scale it from the center, and I could rotate from that pivot point. And with the yellow circles, I can move it down that specific axis. So that's a very easy way to move and askew your models with the Move tool. You could also rotate them with the Rotate tool right here, which is the Y key. They notice if I'm not selecting the box, then it's rotating the entire thing. Because in Modeler, if nothing is selected, everything is selected. Whereas if I just selected this face here, and I hit Y for rotate, it's only going to rotate that face. But if I undo that and drop the selection and then rotate, it'll rotate everything. But if I were to copy and paste this box, so I'm going to select the whole thing, Control C, Control V, T for move, and I'm going to move it over. If I only have this box selected and I rotate, it's only going to rotate that box. And it looks like I'm rotating from the origin. And that's because if I come down here to modes, you can see that I have action center origin. So that's where it's rotating from. But I'm going to choose selection so that it's rotating from the center of that box. So again, if I deselect that and rotate, you can see that they're both rotating. So how do layers work inside of Modeler? Well, up here in the top right-hand corner, you can see that we have a little blue box, and that is our foreground active layer. And these are all layers that are currently unused. So for example, we could come to the second layer by selecting the top of it. If we select the lower half of the first layer, you can see that it puts a black wireframe up of the models in the first layer. So this is kind of like a visual interpretation of where those objects are in the first layer, but you can't edit them. We also have a layers window. Let me bring that up. It's under Windows, Layers panel. And let's uncheck that. And unnamed is our current document that we're on, right there. So if we double click unnamed, it takes us to the first layer. So we could type in 2 boxes and hit OK. And we have the F for foreground and B for background. So for example, I could select this object, and an easy way to select all of it is by selecting one face and hitting the right bracket key to select all of it. Let's cut that out of there and paste it into the second layer. And now you can see that we have a background layer and a foreground layer. So that's the layers panel inside of Modeler. The next important question was, how do you add, remove, and adjust edges? So for this demonstration, I want to load up a character so we have something to look at. So I'm going to hit Control O to load up an object. Let me zoom in here. In the first layer, I have this head. Okay, this tool is new in 11.5, but I wanted to show you guys how easy it is to edit edges with it. So if we come to the Detail tab, we have Edit Edges. So I can select that. And you can see that if I hover over an edge, it highlights it in this pink dotted line. I can left click and drag to the left and right to move it up and down. Or I can go on a vertical edge and I can right click to add an edge loop in there. Or I could shift click on edges to remove them. Again, right click to add an edge in there, and I can also hold that click down to adjust it. So that makes it very easy to adjust and edit your edges. There are a few other tools that you can use in Modeler to edit edges that will be in 11.5 but are in previous versions of Modeler as well. So I'm going to go ahead and draw out a box by hitting the Shift X key, and let me add some segments to that. I also want to open up the display options by hitting the D key, and under the viewports I want to go to top right. I want to choose independent visibility and uncheck show grid and show origin just to get that off of there. X out of that, drop the tool, and hit F2 to center it. So if I wanted to slice right through this loop, I could select that loop, by selecting 2 consecutive polygons and hitting the right arrow key, or selecting 2 consecutive polygons, coming up to select and choosing loop. While that's selected, I could hit the L key, which is connect, and that'll slice directly through the center of those polygons. I could also undo that and use the knife tool, which is Shift K, and that will allow me to draw a line, and I could then slice this up however I want to, and then hit enter to drop the tool. So while I have this box here, or this plane, he also wanted to know how to adjust the flow of the polygons. Well, that's very easy to do, because all we have to do is select 2 consecutive polygons and hit Control K, which is spin quads. To show a better example of this, I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to go into Sub D mode. And I can do that by hitting the Tab key. So as long as I have quads and tris, which is a 4-sided polygon or a 3-sided polygon, I can easily go in and out of Sub D mode by hitting the Tab key. So with Sub D mode on, I'm going to select 2 polygons and hit Control K, and Control K here, and right there, and right there. Let me spin those one more time, and those one more time. So now, if I select that loop, then I can hit the L key to add edge loops in between those areas very easily. So let's go back to the second layer where the body of our character is at, and I'm going to hit Shift A, which will fit selected. Now, I brought this model up for him, and he wanted me to cut a section of the arms off and paste it back into the layer and then select the arm. So what I did was turn on Symmetry Mode, and in Symmetry Mode it's very easy to select both sides of the character. Also in Modeler it's very easy to work on a full head when modeling it, or a full body, not just half of it. So I could right click and lasso select some of this arm. I could very easily just Control X to cut it, and then Control V to paste it. But what you can see now is that if I go to select the body by selecting 1 polygon and hitting the right bracket key, I could also Shift right bracket key to expand my selection, and then I can hit the right bracket key to select all of it. But since I cut that geometry there, it's no longer welded where those points are at. The points from the arm, the lower half of the arm, are no longer welded to the points of the upper half of the arm. So to do that, and for example, I could select the hands and select all those, and you can see that it's only selecting the lower half of the arms. What I have to do is merge the points, and I can do that by hitting the M key. Merge points, automatic, okay, and you can see that 46 points have been eliminated. Now, when I select that, you can see it selects everything. So let me go into a blank layer, all the way on the 4th layer here, and let's hit the D key to go back into the display options, and go to the backdrop tab, bottom left, and I just want to turn these images back on. So he wanted me to just start modeling from a flat plane. Like how would you start detail out modeling from a flat plane? Let's go into the display options and go to viewports, bottom left, and choose independent visibility and uncheck show grid, but I want to leave the origin on so I can see where the center of this character is, and go to bottom right, independent visibility, and uncheck show grid for that as well. So if I were to start detail out modeling this frog, what I would do is hit Shift X, and I would just draw out a plane. And I would hit enter to drop the tool, and F2 to center it. I would also turn on Symmetry Mode so we could very easily work on both sides of this character without hiding the left or right side of it. So I'm going to hit the T key, move this plane into place, and hit the H key for stretch. I can stretch it down a little, and also zoom in. So now I'm hitting the space bar to alternate through my selection processes. I'm going to hit edges, and just select the top edge, and I'm going to extend it by hitting the E key, and then the T key for move. And while a move is still active, I'm just going to keep hitting the E key and extending this. And all I'm going to do is just keep doing this while following the contours of the body. I can also deselect that and select some of the edges in the front. E for extend, move it a little bit. Also rotate it, which is the Y key. And extend it again. Keep extending and keep rotating. I'm going to deselect that, and you can see that right now, if I hit the tab key, I will go in and out of sub-D mode. So hopefully this tutorial made it rather easy for you guys to jump right into Modeler and get started. Let me go ahead and get rid of these images here. Yeah, like I said, the reason I wanted to make this is because I thought that this user, who is very experienced in Maya, was asking some very informative questions that would be helpful to any new user jumping into LightWave, or any existing 3D artist coming from another package that would want to jump into Modeler. I hope that this helped you guys jump into it and get started and just hopefully speed up your workflow.